We are continuing on with our NHL offseason plan series. Today we're looking at the 17th ranked team from the NHL's regular season, the Dallas Stars. What moves will we expect for them this offseason? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're carrying on our NHL offseason plan series, looking at the Dallas Stars offseason and what we should expect from them this year. Now, in case you're following along and looking at the NHL standings, you might be asking yourself, why are we not doing the Montreal Canadiens today? If you look at the standings in order, technically they would be next. But since they are still hanging on in the Stanley Cup Playoffs, I've decided to skip over them for right now. Obviously, it's hard to do a what's next video or an offseason plan video until their season's completely over because you don't know how it's going to end. So for right now, we're going to go to Dallas and we'll come back to Montreal just as soon as they are eliminated from the playoffs, or if they do happen to win the Stanley Cup, then of course we'll do them last. Either way, we'll do them when their season is completed. So now let's take a look at the regular season stats for the Dallas Stars, where we're going to analyze their results, their cap space, and more. So looking at their regular season results here, you can see they finished with a record of 23, 19, and 14 for 60 points. There's a lot of overtime losses there that really could have made a huge difference in their season between making the playoffs or not. Obviously, that's something that they need to really look at here. They're a +4 goal differential. So clearly, that's not bad, but for a team that's kind of on the bubble of making the playoffs, something that we kind of expect, but could certainly be better. The power play was really good this year, 23.6% success rate for 5th best. And the PK was a little bit below average at 79.1% for 19th best. Now, heading into this offseason, they currently have a $16.9 million in salary cap space. And of course, this team started off on the wrong foot as well. They obviously were one of the first teams impacted by COVID and had a delay to start their season, which many thought was going to really have an impact. And I think it's fair to say that it certainly did. But once they kind of got rolling, things were okay. But they had their moments this year when they looked like a good, solid team that had a shot at the playoffs. And of course, they had their moments when things kind of fell apart as well. So now let's take a look at the upcoming contract situation for the Stars. Who do they have for restricted and unrestricted free agents heading into the summertime here? Now, on the RFA list, I do have some interesting players. They have Jason Dickinson, Joel Kiviranta, Rhett Gardner. Of course, defenseman Mir Heiskanen is going to be the big one here, the one we have to probably watch the most and be most curious about. And they also have RFA defenseman Julius Honka. Now, of course, Honka had a situation where he sat out an entire season because of a contract dispute, didn't want to sign, wanted to be traded, ended up coming back this past season, and he never really got to play. So I would imagine that he probably won't be qualified, and he'll probably be made a UFA, would be my guess this time around. I'd be somewhat surprised if he does sign, given the lack of opportunity over the past few years. Now, on the UFA side of things, they do have a good-sized list here. It'd be interesting to see what happens to these players. We've got Andrew Cogliano, you got Blake Como, Justin Dowling. On the back end, you've got Jamie Alexiak, Sami Vatanen, and Mark Pysyk, as well as Steven Johns, who unfortunately finished the year again on LTIR after making a comeback. I would think it's probably fair to say Steven Johns' career very well might be over. I'd be surprised if he continues on. He's had a lot of unfortunate bad luck with concussions, and it might be best that he not pursue things any further to make sure his quality of life is as good as possible. I guess we'll see what doctors say, and if he wants to continue trying to play, I'm not sure, but I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if this is the end of the road for him. When it comes to those UFAs, though, I mean, you got Cogliano, who's 33, Como's 35. Do they bring back these types of players, or do they go in a new direction, try to get a little younger and a little faster, maybe some more skill there? It's hard to say. I do think they have a good group of forwards to build around, so I'm not sure what direction they go in, but to be honest, I'd be surprised if some of these veterans came back. On the back end, I think they'd really like to keep Jamie Alexiak. I know there was some trade talk around him at the deadline, never came to be, and I think Jim Nill really wants to sign him. We've really seen him evolve the last couple of years, and he's a lot better defenseman than he was earlier in his career when he bounced around more. I don't see Vatanen coming back. Pysyk, probably not. but debatable, I guess. We'll see. Now, obviously, we're going to now jump into the 5 burning questions category of this video, where we take a look at the top items that this team needs to address this offseason. The top burning question for me heading into the offseason for Dallas is, how do they address their goaltending situation? Now, of course, right now they have 3 capable goaltenders with Anton Khudobin, Ben Bishop, and Jake Ottinger. But of course, things are going to change, and it's quite likely that one goalie leaves the organization either via trade or via expansion. Now, Anton Khudobin is likely going to be that player for a couple of reasons. One, Jake Ottinger is the youngest of the group. Clearly, he could be the goaltender of the future, at least potential. You want to keep him around. And Ben Bishop has a no-move clause. So unless he wants to and agrees to go somewhere else, Big Ben's not going anywhere. So that leaves Khudobin, who still has some term on his contract, and to me would be very attractive to the Kraken. I mean, he's proven here just a year removed from that long playoff run with the Dallas Stars that he can handle a heavy workload. Even though he's getting a little bit older, like, he can handle it. He's a good goaltender, great results. And to me, he could be a good goalie to have in the mix with the Kraken. The Kraken might end up taking maybe 4 or 5 goaltenders anyways, and maybe moving 1 or 2 out as well. So, it's could either way, that he either plays for the Kraken or becomes a trade chip. But to me, would be one of the more attractive pieces on the Stars based on who else they'd likely protect. But it is a situation where they could get out in front of it and trade him ahead of time to kind of make sure that they lose a player of less significance off their roster too. So we'll have to see what Dallas does. But to me, Ben Bishop likely doesn't go because of the contract. Ottinger stays because of his age and his potential for the future. So I think this is the end of the road for Khudobin with the Stars. I would hope they would try to get something in return via trade, rather than risk lose nothing here in the expansion draft. Now, burning question number 2 is, can they get Tyler Seguin back to where he was prior to his major injury and surgery? He basically missed the entire season, came back for a very short stint here near the end of the year to try to help this team get into the playoffs, and as soon as they knew they weren't going to make the cut, he ended up cut his season short and sat out the last few games as well. Tyler Seguin had a major injury, major recovery phase. I know a lot of people gave him a lot of grief for his playoff production, you could say, in their long playoff run the year before, but he was dealing with some pretty serious stuff, and hopefully now we all understand what he was going through. But obviously, whether or not he gets back to 100% or anywhere close is absolutely huge. He has a mega contract for this team, a lot of years left with a lot of money, over $9 million, and if they can't get the Tyler Seguin production that he was putting up when they signed that contract a few years ago, that's going to become a major issue. They already have Captain Jamie Benn under contract for a long term as well, also for big money, slightly less than Seguin signed for. And his production is down a lot compared to when he won the Art Ross Trophy a few years back. I mean, he's gradually been declining and really hasn't, to me at least, lived up to that big ticket that he signed. I mean, he's still a really good player, a good leader. Not like I wouldn't want him on my team. It's just, it's a lot for what he gets paid, is all I'm saying. So they need Seguin back to 100%, and it'd be interesting to see how confident they are in his recovery. Now, he did get a couple goals when he came back to play, and obviously looked like he was doing decent. But obviously, I think it's fair to say as well that he wasn't fully 100%. And so that's probably why he sat out, to risk, any kind of flare-ups or any other issues with the injury. So whether or not he gets back to normal will be huge for this team. Burning question number 3 is, how do you handle the Miro Heiskanen contract? And will it impact the future of John Klingberg in Dallas? Now, clearly Heiskanen had a really solid rookie campaign, has continued to grow since then. He's one of the better young defensemen in the NHL. I'm not sure what his contract status is going to be, but he is obviously an RFA, as we already previously mentioned, and that's going to need a significant raise. It's going to be a new second contract, probably going to be a bridge deal, but they may try to go long-term with him. It really boils down to the money and what each side's looking for. If the player might want to bet on himself, go short, or the team might want him to go long-term, so they have that long-term predictability of what he's going to be paid for the next 5, 6, 7 years. So hard to say where they go. Either way, he's worth it and is a great piece for this future. But you have to think, with the other guys they have in their blue line, long-term deal for a guy like Esa Lindell, Heiskanen taking on the role that he has. He's only going to continue to grow. Is it worth considering a trade for John Klingberg? I mean, Klingberg's also a pretty solid defenseman. I think he'd generate good interest, being a right shot, offensively capable guy on the blue line. But based on where this team is heading, I think they need to continue to get younger. Not that Klingberg's overly old, but he's, obviously getting into the latter 20s now, and it might be time to move him and make way for a younger blue line like Heiskanen taking on the biggest role here. But we'll see what happens. But if I'm Jim Nill, I'm at least considering that trade. Now, another big factor here as well is, can they continue to find ways to get younger? This team needs to get injected with a little bit more youth. Obviously, they've had a guy like Jason Robertson on the team, up for Rookie of the Year. They have some other younger pieces as well, trying to find their way as well. And obviously, they have a middle-of-the-road first-round pick coming up in the 2021 NHL Draft. And to be completely honest, if I'm Jim Nill, I'll consider keeping that pick. You get a decent player, but I think whatever player you get around pick 14, 15 in the draft is probably going to be somebody who's 2 to 3 years away from making an impact. They may not be that long from being in the NHL, but for really, being at their peak potential. So to me, you consider trading that pick if you can get a really solid younger player. Let's say there's an RFA out there with a lot of potential that's having contract negotiation difficulties with their existing club, or they want out, or they want a fresh start, something like that. You consider doing that. If you can get the right higher end young player, you make that deal. So to me, it's not a given that the Dallas Stars actually use that draft selection. They need to find ways to get younger, and obviously by using some of those assets to get a solid young player who can play today as opposed to a couple of years from now would be a big help. And the last burning question here for me, who do they bring back from these expiring contracts? If you look at the veteran guys, do they bother bringing back Como or Cogliano? You get, obviously in the blue line, you get Jamie Alexiak, you get Sami Vatanen. To me, Alexiak's probably the only one that's really worth bringing back. The rest of them, I think you have to let them go. You only have so much cap space. The Heiskanen contract's going to be a pretty decent raise. You need to fill up the rest of your roster. That's why you let those veteran guys go. And you also consider moving Klingberg. You had a season where they were a Stanley Cup finalist, and then you have a season that they're not even a playoff team. So you have to find out the true identity of this team. What are they really? There's bound to be some change between expansion and everything else and all these expiring deals, and they need to shape this team with a little bit more youth, a little bit more speed, a little bit more skill, and see where this team goes. They do have a lot of good pieces they can continue to work with here, and it's just a matter of what they can do. So let me know your thoughts on how you feel the Dallas Stars are going to handle their offseason. What moves do you expect? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.